Hi everyone. Today we will discuss multiple inheritance. Multiple inheritance is until now that we have discussed we have studied chain of inheritance. So actually, what is the difference between chain of inheritance and multiple inheritance? The left one is a chain of inheritance and the right one is multiple inheritance. Why? Because you see, in the left one here we have a class A, a class A, which is and we have a class A and another one we have a class B. The class B is derived from A and class C is derived from B and class D is derived from C. So in this tree and this chain, actually every class has one base class. So such an inheritance where each class has one base class, that is called chain of inheritance. Even though they are there is many inheritance in the chain, but still it is considered chain of inheritance. It is not multiple inheritance. So the main criteria for multiple inheritance is that like this here, that class A and class B, and we derived class C from both A and B. So here class C has two base classes. So if a class has two or more than two base classes, that is called multiple inheritance. So the main criteria is two or more than two base classes. So in such a case, it is called multiple inheritance. Okay, so you see a derived class can have more than one base class. So if the derived class has more than one base class, it is called multiple inheritance, and each base class can have its own access specification in the derived class. For example, like this, if we have a class cube and we want to derive from a class square and class rect solid, then we can derive like this. Like a class cube is derived from class square and from class solid rect. So both from both it is derived publicly. Okay, and the diagram show like this, like class cube is derived from this one also and from derived from this one also. So in this case the class cube has two base classes. Therefore it is called multiple inheritance. In in multiple inheritance, if the derived class constructor call the base class constructor, then it will be in this case. For example, the cube constructor is calling the constructor of a square and constructor of rect solid and passing arguments. So in this case, one argument to square and three arguments to solid rect, and the cube has one argument. And so the question is how the cube has one argument and how it can pass four arguments to base class constructor. Actually, in this special case, each diagram has sides. So the same variable, the same argument is replicated, used multiple times. Otherwise, if the arguments are of different nature, then the cube constructor must have enough number of arguments to pass to base constructor. I will explain this later on in another example where it will be clear. Okay, so base class constructors are called in order in the class declaration. So it means here we are calling the cube constructor is calling square first and then a rect solid. But this order is actually not necessary. The order of calling the parent class constructor based on the inheritance time, how you have inherited. If you have inherited first from square and then from rect solid, then the order will be like that. If you have inherited in the other way, for example, first from solid rect and then from square, then the constructor will be called in that order. Even though if you write like this also, still it follows the inheritance order. Okay, so they are always called in the order of inheritance. So here the writing way is doesn't matter. What about destructor? Destructor in a derived class, if a derived class destructor call base class destructor, so then the calling order will always be in a reverse order. Meaning to say, first the later class constructor destructor will call, then the second one, like in this case, first the rect solid will be called, then the square will be called, and then the cube will be called in a reverse order. Okay, there is one very fundamental problem in multiple inheritance, and that is that if the base classes have members variables or member functions with the same name, let's suppose in this case, if let's suppose class A also has a function show, and the class B also has a function show, so these two show functions will come to class C. Then how the class C will deal with two same member functions? So compiler cannot actually decide. There are two solutions for that. One solution is that the derived class, in this example case the C class, should redefine the show class, the show function. So by redefining, the problem can be solved. This is one solution. Another solution, if the derived class constructor want to call base class constructor or base class functions or base class any data members, then the derived class should explicitly use the base class name and scope resolution operator. If you don't use any of these solution, then the compiler will be confused and cannot decide which function to call, and an error will be generated. It's the same explanation. Like it should be noted that the multiple inheritance open the opportunity for derived class to have ambiguous members. Ambiguous members means same name from one class and same name from another class. Same members from one base class and same members from another base class, so same name will come inherited to child class, then it become ambiguous for the child one. That is, two base classes may have member variables or function of the same class. In this situation, the derived class should always redefine or override the member functions. Overriding can be done in a case of virtual functions. Okay, and if there is no virtual functions, then simply overriding can solve this problem. Meaning to say that the derived class will define the same ambiguous functions with the same name but with its own details. Class to member functions of the appropriate base class can be performed within a derived class using a scope resolution operator. So second solution is that the derived class can call the base class functions or data members with the scope resolution operator. The derived class can also access ambiguous name members variables of the correct base class using scope resolution operator. If these steps are not taken, the compiler will generate an error when it cannot tell which member is being accessed. So the compiler cannot decide which function should be called. Later on in a coding, I will explain to you. Okay, so this is these are two diagrams. So which of the following diagrams shows multiple inheritance, and which one shows chain of inheritance? I am leaving to you. Okay, now let's come to one example. Okay, so let's implement the concept of multiple inheritance. Here we have a class date, and this has a protected data members day, month, and year. Okay, and in the public section it has a default constructor. Okay, this is actually a mistake in the textbook also. In the textbook also it is given like this, but it is a mistake. Default constructor don't have any arguments, so it should be like this. Okay, so default constructor initialize the data members with default values, like here day equal to 1, month equal to 1, year equal to 1900. And overloaded constructor, it has 3 arguments, day, month, year, and the variables are initialized with the same arguments. These are the accessor functions: get year, get month, and get day. So these functions are simply displaying the day, month, and year. Another class we have time. In the same way like the date class, it has hours, minutes, and seconds as a protected data members, and in the public it has mm, uh, time default constructor, and it initializes the hour, minutes, and second with default values. And overloaded constructor, here it has hour, minutes, and seconds as arguments, and initialize the variables with the same uh, arguments. So again, accessors functions just to display hours, minutes, and second. Here is the multiple inheritance. We have another class, date time, and this date time is inherited from date and time. And you see, this is the order of calling, because we are inheriting uh, first from date and then from time. So when the constructors are called, then the first date base constructor will be called, then time base class constructor will be called. And if there are destructors, then it will be in the reverse order. Okay, so in this date time class, we have a default constructor and then overloaded constructor. Now look at this. This overloaded constructor has 6 arguments. Why 6 arguments? Because the first 3 are for date, day, month, and year. The second 3 are for the time, hours, minutes, and second. So the first 3 will be sent to one base constructor, and the second 3 will be sent to another base class constructor. And it has show date functions also. So these two functions are defined outside the class. If you see here, this is the default one defined outside the class, and this is the overloaded constructor defined outside the class. This is why we are using scope resolution operator. So you see here the constructor, yeah, date base class constructor, and 3 arguments to this constructor, and then the time constructor, and sends 3 arguments to this one. Okay, after that, the show date time function, which is defined outside the class, and this one is simply displaying the three members, like get month, get day, it will display day, this one will display year, this one will display hour, and minutes, and seconds. Okay, now uh, okay, now to implement this multiple inheritance in int main, then you see we have int main function from here. Here we created a date time, which is a derived class, and we created the date time object empty day. Empty day means that we didn't pass any arguments here, like this. Okay, meaning to say we didn't call any constructor to initialize, so we don't pass any value, so it will be empty. So empty day, and then the empty day dot, we are calling this show function. So when this show date time function is called, it will display all the default values, and all the default values are just empty values, the 0 1 1 and 0 0, it will display that one. Here we are creating another object, past day. So we are passing arguments. Here you can actually pass any argument that you want. For example, 27 and 6 is the month, and 2020 is the year, and the time is 250 to 205, and the seconds are 27. So it will display this one. So let's run. If you see this one, you see the first one, the empty day, it display all the empty values like the default values. The second one is displaying the month, day, year, and the time. So this is the way how multiple inheritance works. But here I am leaving the challenge for you, that there is no same functions, same name functions in the parent classes. For example, parent class date, if let's suppose it has a function with the same name, like let's suppose void um, show. Okay, let's suppose it has the same, the function void show, and the other parent class, which is time, let's suppose it also has the same function with the same name void show. So when we inherit the date time from both, so then it will get two functions as a inheritance. For example, like this, I'm just showing that it will have two functions inherited from parents like this. So when the child class object is calling the show function, then which show function should be called? This is the ambiguity and this is the problem. So to solve this problem, you will have to redefine this show function in the derived class one time, not two time. You will define here, and here the implementation will be different, its own version, different from parents one. Then the compiler can decide one solution. Another solution, if you want that the child class should call this function, then it will call like this, that for example class time, okay, and then scope resolution operator, and then call. So now it is clear that time base class show function should be called. If you want to call a date base class constructor, then you will call like this. So these are the two solutions, one a redefinition and one to explicitly call with scope resolution operator. So hopefully it will be clear. If any confusion, then we will discuss during class time, and we will do some activity to implement this one. So please get ready, and if any question when you are watching this video, note the questions and we will discuss during class.